Hi everybody, welcome to Chapter 5 in Budgets and Financial Management in Higher Education. This chapter specifically looks at the notion of auxiliary and capital budgets. As I said in the previous chapter when we looked at Chapter 4, this is going to be a chapter that's almost exclusively to higher education. So I think it'll be interesting. I think it's important that you pay attention, and I'm pretty sure you'll get something out of this. This is a little different than what you see in a public school setting. It's special budgeting. You're going to see auxiliary budgets more in higher education, and you'll understand why when I present it. When you work in a county system, the capital budgets are going to be the same, so there's going to be similarities between public universities and education programs, but the auxiliary budget is really where the difference is. So my previous job actually was auxiliary budgets. This was my primary role. I ran Edinburgh University's partnership with Butler County Community College. It was at a branch campus, and I was completely responsible for the budget. I had to fund everything. I had to make sure that it was staffed appropriately, that we had the number of students to run the courses, we got the correct instructional supplies. So I did a lot with that, and there was important that money came in that benefited both the community college and both the hosting university. I don't have an FSC perspective of this because I don't see anything on our campus that specifically qualifies as this, but I really looked at U of F and UCF. I think when you understand this, to at least see it from another perspective, this is a bigger university thing, and you want to look at this from a bigger university thing, but at least you'll have a similar frame of reference from a larger university. So auxiliary budgets are self-supporting. This means that they fall under the same institutional guidelines. They have budget items, but they are there to generate revenue and self-sustain. So in theory, if you're doing this appropriately, you're not going to have to invest any money in these types of programs because they're going to make money themselves. They're going to fund their own faculty, they're going to fund their own facilities, they're going to fund their own staff. In a lot of ways too, grants will end up coming in to help them as well, and you'll see that in medical programs and dental programs. But there are good examples in higher ed that are worth investigating. So hotel and restaurant management service is huge in this region. I mean, you don't need me to tell you that, but this is one of the things that really can generate money for an institution and self-sustain. UCF has one of the top 5 hotel and restaurant management service programs in the United States, but also the reason that they have it is because why wouldn't you go to Orlando to learn how to do hotel and restaurant management? I mean, maybe Nevada would be a better place, but you're going to learn how to do this stuff in Orlando. It makes sense. They give their students experience, but the students can also make money. The program can make money because people stay at the hotel, and there's a service attitude that's involved in it. So why it's in Orlando, and it's why this program matters. Veterinary science programs are the same. Probably the best one in the United States is at Ohio State. It's where anybody who wanted to be a vet, if close to Pittsburgh, went to Ohio State, and students actually operated their veterinary program as a business. So customers would come in, they'd pay money, animals would get the treatment they needed, and that's how they learned, and they also made a stipend as well. One of the things that I thought was interesting when I looked at their model was the fact that patients had to sign a waiver because students are working on their pets. So obviously that could be a liability concern, and it's imperative that you reduce liability when things like that could happen. So dental programs, very similar to this as well. One of the largest ones in the United States is at the University of Florida, and that one is almost 100% self-sustaining with no external funding coming in at all. That one makes a considerable profit too, but once again, you have to sign waivers and receive reduced costs for services by allowing students to treat patients. Most of the time, the auxiliary units will pay for services to the institution. So if they need a security guard, if they need custodians, the auxiliary budget has to actually pay for that. So when I say that it's self-sustaining, for the most part, it is completely self-sustaining, which means that the programming decisions they make and the decisions they make really can impact the budget. And it's why you don't see many of these in K-12. I mean, and you're not going to. It's not going to exist because those services are coming out of an individualized budget, and they're using university services. It's housed in the university, but they're also existing to make a revenue to allow more students in the program. So maintenance should come from the institutional budget or from the budget system at the auxiliary support level, if it is a true system. Because it's institutionalized and it's in a program, you need to know what 1, 5, and 10 years look like. So once again, you've heard me say the terms transparency and strategic plan throughout this class. So you have to know this, especially in the form of technology systems. My wife graduated from Point Park University in Pittsburgh, and if you look Point Park up, you're going to find that they are a very, very private, small liberal arts school that has one of the top 3 theater programs in the United States. That's what they're known for. She was a psychology major there, but she had classes with a ton of theater people. Their standalone theater program was one of the biggest expenses, and they used institutional and auxiliary budgeting and capital funding for the program because it was the breadwinner for the school. So reserves are different in auxiliary services. This is a big idea. When you have an auxiliary service, you should save. Take as much as you can and use it for what you think you're going to need in a few years. For other programs, spend, 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 because you don't know when the money's going to go away. But reserve funds will allow you to take on more students and lighten the load, which is pretty important. So capital budgets, it's basically taking down buildings, creating new buildings, building new facilities, and we do this all the time in this profession. The main reason we do it, honestly, relates to technology more than anything else. We have to do redesign and develop buildings when there's a technology change, because technology does change constantly, and we need to be prepared, and we need to understand what that looks like and how that can potentially influence how a building looks like, and if a building will have Wi-Fi access or plug-in capabilities and things like that. Capital budgeting needs multiple representatives from a lot of stakeholders. Board of directors, board of trustees will get involved in it. You have to know what 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, maybe even 25 years in the future looks like. You have to think about parking too. Think about how difficult it is to park on various college campuses. That is a big consideration and a big idea that you have to make in this profession. If you're making a major capital investment, you might be using construction space where people were usually parking at. So that could screw parking up for the next year or so, which could even be a bigger problem that was an unintended consequence of things. I'm a Disney nut, one of the reasons why I'm here, but you know, this whole notion of, you know, the Imagineering concept is this idea that design people take a look at all elements of facility design and theming concepts. If I had a picture of it, it would be really cool, but if you've been to the animal kingdom and you've seen the Tree of Life, the Tree of Life actually is an oil rig, and there's an entire oil rig structure that's still inside of it. And under the park is built on tunnels where you can get basically anywhere you need to, underground and under the tunnels. And if you've ever taken the tour, you're aware of that. But I mean, so I think it's an important concept because they plan for all of this. Only 30% of the land at Disney is actually used. They still have 70% more land that they can grow and develop. So when you have capital budgets, one of the things that you'll see is that it's a self-financing type of system. It's very common for sums to be transferred to reserves to fund things that are ongoing or deferred. Facilities need different improvements in different times. People can speculate when repairs need to happen, and you can kind of know, well, the building would probably need upgraded in 2 or 3 years. Sometimes it lasts longer, sometimes it doesn't. So saving that money and use it for where it's potentially appropriate, that's another possibility that you can do with your budgeting decisions. So donors do support capital projects. Most of them do it because they want their names on the project and they want it to be their library, their building. You've seen this a ton. These large donations are paid for naming rights. My high school stadium in Pennsylvania, we have 501 school districts. I had the best high school stadium in the state. We called it Coca-Cola Stadium though. The scoreboard had a Coke bottle on it. It was controversial at the time, but we had an amazing stadium. but that has since gone away. But I remember when that came in at my high school, we basically had to eliminate Pepsi products from all of our extracurricular activities. We had to take any machines out that had Pepsi. Us as teachers were even encouraged not to pass out Pepsi to students, or not to pass out Pepsi to students, but to tell them to get a Coke instead if they brought it in for lunch. But we had probably the best stadium in Allegheny County. So that's something that happens when you have gift support. People want something in exchange. If there's a need, you can do a bond, just like we talked about in K-12 education, and that's common. One of the things that you're going to do when you get a bond, you're going to go through a credit check, you're going to get credit ratings, and you're going to use the Moody's rating or the Standards & Poor's rating to kind of rate and grade from A to C or D based on credit worthiness. So institutions can fund capital projects through state and federal resources, but most of the time these really are for the programs that are currently sexy in the United States. So it has to be something that the state says we have a definitive need for. Any of your energy-related programs right now, that is a huge idea in higher education. Agriculture is getting renewed interest as well. So the state's likely to give state appropriations for programs like that where they might not for certain programs in education. So joint ventures are highly controversial. And I'm saying that despite what the textbook says. My experiences with these can be a challenge because if you let the community kick in for buildings on a college campus and use them, you lose the autonomy and you lose the space that you were planning on using for instructional purposes. If I was in charge of a higher education institution, I would be partnering with K-12 or community colleges. I would not partner with a business and let them use the facilities. I know there are some schools in the state that do that. It's a practice, but me, myself, I don't necessarily think that's a viable and it's a smart way to do things. So we talk about energy conservation. We'll think about the importance of the green movement. Buildings have switched to this green green, eco-friendly idea, but in turn, when they're doing that, the government will fund it, they'll reduce taxes, so if you can equip the facility to be a green facility, that's going to actually get you a tax break. In terms of auxiliary costs, I've talked about the Healthy Schools movement a little bit already, but that's one that can reduce it as well if you agree to the federal mandates involved with supporting and having a healthy school. So there's always hidden costs. We mentioned this in K-12 as well, but work orders change. A project started, it doesn't look the way it's supposed to. You realize you need more money for it. There's not enough parking spaces. We need more offices in the building. When this occurs, unexpected costs come out of anywhere. If you don't have enough space or if there's ADA accessibility issues, this can be a problem as well. But try to keep this in mind as you move forward with programming and planning. So notice how quick these chapters are getting right now. A lot of the ones in the beginning were long. These are more narrow and more specific. The rest of the chapters in this text are quick, and I think that's good. So as always, let me know if there's anything else I can do to help, and I hope this was a good overview for you. Thank you.